Right, 23 minutes before 9 here on the program. This week is World Breastfeeding Week, and women in South Africa are encouraged to save an infant by donating breast milk. The South African Breast Milk Reserve, a non-profit organization, says it is vital that the culture of breastfeeding grows in the country. Joining us now is Stasha Jordan, the Executive Director of the South African Breast Milk Reserve. Good to have you here. Thanks so much for coming, Stasha.
Good morning. Thanks for having us.
All right, so what does the statistics say currently about the amount of South African women that are actually breastfeeding? Well,
the statistics has seen a notable increase over the last decade. In fact, we have seen the breastfeeding rates grow from, let's say, 7% to 32%. Up to 3 months. Obviously, extended breastfeeding is more difficult because mothers return back to work very often.
All right, so that in itself is a very difficult thing, because I know that, I mean, you see mothers rushing back to work and trying to, balance it all, but
yes.
It is very, very difficult for a mother to continue breastfeeding when they have come back to work. So, and I mean, our leave is how much? I suppose it depends.
4 months, the law says that mothers have 4 months paid maternity leave under unemployment fund. However, paid is a very relative term, because unemployment only pays a maximum of 41% of your salary. So you can imagine that you're going from earning a full salary to earning less than half of your salary. You're adding a mouth to the table, and essentially you have to now also breastfeed and consider returning to work. So you take a month before you give birth, and then 3 months after you give birth. And it's really difficult for mummies to continue to breastfeed until such time as we improve our maternity protection laws.
Yeah, it certainly is an issue, and I know that that's something to look into and work at very, very closely. I want to have a look at the benefits, because we always talk to them. The benefits of breastfeeding for any child, and the duration that any mother should persevere through breastfeeding.
Sure. So we can start by saying that it is the first vaccine a baby receives, and it offers incredible immunoprotection for the baby in the first 6 months of life. So that is the first benefit. The second benefit is that it actually promotes frequent and close interaction with the mother. So we bring in the element of care and love, and that contributes to the healthy growth and development of the brain. It's also optimal food. So we find that children that are breastfed are less likely to suffer from stunting later on in life, or obesity on the other hand. And in South Africa, we have a problem of both stunting in children, which means overall underdevelopment, and we have a problem of obesity. Yeah. So we need to breastfeed our children, and we need to commit to growing our breastfeeding rates in the future.
Is there such a thing as breastfeeding for too long? Because there's always that talk of some people looking and saying, oh, maybe this is going overboard. Or is it something that the longer that you breastfeed, or you're able to breastfeed your child, the better?
There is such a thing as people not minding their own business.
That is
really the biggest problem. It's none of anyone's business how long we choose to breastfeed our children.
Indeed.
We had a really funny conversation with the Minister of Health on the 1st of August, and he says that his weaning was a negotiation at the age of 3. So, prolonged breastfeeding shows, in fact, to have a lot of benefits for toddlers. And in fact, it is even more beneficial in areas that are impoverished, where children wouldn't have access to food, water, sanitation. In those environments, prolonged breastfeeding is essential.
Yeah, it is, and it is. I mean, the benefits you've spoken to them, but it's also this perception from a lot of mothers that feel a lot of pressure on them to breastfeed, but they just can't get it right, and that is a reality for a lot of women that struggle through it. I mean, I was one of them. On my first pregnancy with my first child, I really struggled on breastfeeding. Second one was a breeze for me, but that guilt I faced as a mother and not being able to persevere for long enough, it was also a different side to the story.
It is also about the cultures that we're pushing at any particular moment in time. I think we need to start with the assumption that parenting at large is not easy.
Yeah.
So you can imagine that a mother at her first arms breastfeeding will struggle. Breastfeeding is not easy. We need to stop telling women that breastfeeding is easy, but we need to start encouraging them by modeling breastfeeding behaviors for future generations. So yes, it is a struggle at first to breastfeed, and I myself struggled. I remember tears from me, tears from my firstborn, tears from the granny, and is the baby going to eat? But a certain amount of perseverance, especially in the first 3 days of life. You know, I think what happens is that mummies don't see breast milk in the first 3 days, and then they feel very inadequate. And in the first 48 hours, the breast produces colostrum, which is in really tiny quantities you shouldn't see. The baby should suckle on the breast, and the baby should cry, and you should cry, and everything will be okay. You know, we need to encourage women to understand that not everything in life is easy, and parenting certainly is not an easy task. So breastfeeding is something that we learn, and it's almost an art and a skill that we hone over time.
Yeah, I suppose you're right in that one. But I want to talk about the misperceptions that still exist with regard to breastfeeding as well. And there's always this public opinion. I loved your answer to that. Everybody has an opinion. They should just keep their opinions to themselves, but they don't. No. And I mean, the whole issue of breastfeeding in public and the issue of just people having far too much to say, which makes you feel a little bit uncomfortable as a mother. How do we handle something like that in that situation?
First and foremost, I think women need to empower themselves from the point of view of taking a stance and of emancipating yourself in your role as a mother and in breastfeeding. Don't listen to people that discourage you from breastfeeding. Don't listen to strangers. If you don't know this person from a bar of soap and they have something to say about breastfeeding, remind them that their neck turns 180 degrees, so they can always look in another direction. Women must be encouraged and supported to breastfeed at all times and in all environments. Certainly not encouraged to breastfeed in toilets or encouraged to hide away to breastfeed. Okay. So we need to create an enabling society that doesn't need breastfeeding rooms. We need to be able to breastfeed anywhere, anytime, as it's required.
Are there countries that do this? I mean, are there countries that are very progressive in this and have actually embraced that?
We are quite progressive as a country. I think South Africa is really progressive.
I do have to agree.
A lot of our bigger employers have policies for breastfeeding in the workplace, which in essence protect mothers during the time of breastfeeding. So we are creating enabling environments and conducive environments to breastfeeding. Yeah. Perhaps, you have countries like Australia and Canada, which are at the forefront with some of the highest breastfeeding statistics. However, South Africa is really on top there with the normalization of breastfeeding, at least as a movement.
Yeah. Let's talk to the reserve now, the South African Breast Milk Reserve. I've heard, and through your press statement, you're saying that the South African Breast Milk Reserve recruit 1,200 viable breast milk donors annually, but nearly 60% are ruled out. Why is this?
That's 1,200 is literally 1 out of 6. So you can imagine some 8,000 mummies apply.
Okay.
However, we have exclusion criteria. Much as with any tissue banking, we have to meet certain quality standards. So, for instance, we do not accept breast milk from mummies that have sexually transmitted infections for the time being, because there isn't enough research evidence to show that through pasteurization, let's say, we kill HIV and then the breast milk could be used. But perhaps that's something that we have in the future. We also don't accept mummies that take medications, and some medications that in fact are indicated for breastfeeding are contraindicated for human milk banking. Mm-hmm. So, for instance, a lot of the antidepressants such as Eglonol and Esperide, we have drugs for hypertension, we can't use, because we cannot use medications that one would affect the neurodevelopment of the brain of the premature baby. So here we're talking about feeding donated breast milk to a very tiny baby, not necessarily the full-term baby that mothers feed and then are using other medications with.
That's quite fascinating, because I mean, you'll find that doctors very easily will prescribe you Eglonol just to enhance your breast milk.
They overprescribe Eglonol, and they overprescribe what are actually atypical antipsychotics, often not informing mothers correctly of what they are taking. So we will have often mummies that will sign up with us and then we will do a telephonic screening so that we understand, obviously, that the mum is not drinking, taking habit-forming drugs, or medications that are not indicated for breastfeeding. And they'll say, yeah, no, I'm taking that breastfeeding vitamin. It's important for everyone to know that Eglonel and Esperide are not vitamins. They are atypical antipsychotics. So they are mood stabilizers, they're antidepressants. They definitely help some mummies through the initial stages of motherhood. However, if you're taking Eglonel for the purpose of lactation, it should only be a 3-day course of Eglonel, not a full duration of lactation course.
My final question to you is, you talk about a reserve of breast milk and how people will apply and get it to try and help the baby. What about if my friend and I are sort of give birth at the same time? How healthy is it to share breast milk amongst mothers?
Well, milk sharing is a really controversial topic because let's say that instinctively I would say it's natural to share breast milk between family members, and it's something that we have done historically and through time, where sisters have breastfed each other's babies, wet nursing within families, where grannies have taken this on. However, what we need to realize in South Africa is that we have a population of HIV positive mothers that is somewhere around 29%. So there is a lot of communicable disease. There is also a lot of milk sharing in South Africa. In fact, there are milk sharing sites. However, we have it under advisement that the Department of Health is regulating against informal milk sharing to in fact protect recipients from communicable disease.
Very interesting conversation. It really is. It's something that affects everybody, and we need to talk about these things. But to get in touch with you, how do people go about it if they do need your assistance?
We have 24 public sector human milk banks in 5 provinces, so it's easy to find us. If you look on our website, www.sabr.org.za, you can sign up as a donor and we'll get back to you, or direct you to the human milk bank closest to you. Or alternatively, you can contact our offices on 011 482 1920.
Stasha, thank you very much for talking to us here on the program. Very interesting conversation, it really is. So it's a World Breast Milk Week, and we're talking to it here on Morning Live. Stasha Jordan, the Executive Director of the South African Breast Milk Reserve, talking to us about that issue. Let's take a break, and we're talking all things cyber after this. Sakina's guest will tell us all about that. Do stay tuned.